I never liked the name Hope. It felt like a setup, like somebody gave me a name I'd never live up to. In our house, hope was a curse word. Something you held on to right before you got slapped by reality. I was born in a trailer on the edge of a nothing town, somewhere between Amarillo and Oblivion. Dirt roads, dollar stores, and men who called their dogs son but couldn't name their own kids' birthdays. My dad was a drinker, a yeller, a man who thought love meant putting food on the table and silence in the room. My mom? She checked out sometime around my 9th birthday. Still cooked, still cleaned, but you could tell she'd left the building. We weren't poor in a way that made you stronger. We were poor in a way that made you mean. By the time I turned 15, I knew I was getting out. Didn't know how, but I knew staying would kill me slower than anything else. 2 years later, I packed a duffel and hopped a Greyhound to Dallas. I thought the city would feel like freedom, like reinvention, like air. Instead, it just felt loud. I got a job at a gas station on the outskirts of town. Night shifts. Low pay. The kind of place that sold expired Slim Jims and had security cameras that didn't work. I pretended I was biding my time, stacking cash until I could do something real. But every morning I'd wake up a little later, a little heavier. My dreams got quieter. My smile more forced. I dated losers. Or maybe I was the loser, and they just came along for the ride. One guy told me I lacked ambition, right before cheating on me with a bartender. Another said I wasn't wife material after I cried during a movie. The last one ghosted me the moment I told him I'd been fired from my last job for zoning out during a shift. They came and went like trains. I stayed. It was a Wednesday. Cold, gray sky. The kind of day that felt like purgatory. I was already 30 minutes late to my shift, dragging myself down the sidewalk with a coffee in one hand and a half-eaten granola bar in the other. My boots were soaked from a puddle I didn't see. I'd barely slept, again. My eyes felt like sandpaper. My brain felt worse. "You look like shit," my manager said when I walked in. I wanted to say I feel worse, but I didn't. He sat me down in the back room, next to the busted vending machine, and said, "This ain't working out, Hope." He used my name like it offended him. "I need someone who wants to be here. You're always tired. You don't engage customers," and he trailed off. His eyes scanned me like he was afraid I might cry or scream or combust. I didn't do any of that. I nodded, told him, "Yeah, okay." Walked out without even clocking out. I didn't head home. I just walked, past rows of strangers, past honking cars and flashing crosswalks. It was like the world was moving, and I'd finally stopped pretending to keep up. I don't remember making a decision. That's the strange part. There was no dramatic moment, no tears, no final text message. I didn't think I'm going to kill myself. I just stopped wanting to keep myself alive. And that's when I saw the street. 6 lanes of moving traffic. Blurs of motion and engine growls. I stepped toward the curb. My boots met the edge. I stood there for a second. 1 second. 2. Then I walked. The SUV was black. Big. Loud. Angry. I remember locking eyes with the driver. Or maybe I imagined that part. He had a look, panic maybe, or confusion, or nothing at all. I closed my eyes. I didn't pray, didn't scream. I just let go. And then, yank. My body snapped back like a puppet on strings. I hit the pavement, palms scraping on the rough sidewalk. My lungs forgot how to breathe. My head spun. I blinked. There was no one there. Just a feather. Floating, delicate, ridiculous in the middle of concrete and chaos. A peacock feather. It shimmered. Like it didn't belong to this world. Blue, green, gold. Alive. I sat there, stunned, as it hovered for a second, then drifted down, spinning lazily until it landed beside me. I reached out. It lifted, like caught by an invisible hand, and then it was gone, carried off by a wind I hadn't felt until that moment. No person. No explanation. Just that. That feather. I got up slowly. My hands were bleeding. My knees ached. But I walked. People stared. A few cars honked like I was the problem. Like I hadn't just died and come back without knowing how. I made it back to my apartment, pushed through the door, dropped my bag, and headed straight to the cheap bottle of whiskey on my counter. Poured it into a mug. No ice.
No pause.
I drank until my limbs forgot how to move. Crawled to the couch. And passed out. That night I had a dream. I was back on the road. But slower this time. Like I was watching it all in molasses. The SUV coming. My foot lifting. The wind rising. And then the hand. Fingers. Firm but gentle. Wrapping around my arm. Pulling me back. But I couldn't see his face. Only that feather. Floating just above him. Like it was him. When I woke up, I was crying. Silent tears. Slow and confused. I whispered out loud. "Who the hell are you?" But the room had no answer. The next morning, I woke up on the floor. The sun was burning through the cheap blinds like a spotlight on failure. My mouth felt like cotton, my head like a jackhammer. Empty whiskey bottle rolled, somewhere under the couch. The same playlist had been looping all night, sad girl indie stuff that I used to cry to back when crying still felt like release. Now it was just background noise. I sat up, slow. Every part of me ached. Physically, yeah. But deeper than that, too. Like my bones remembered the street. Like my body was trying to process that it had almost ended. And that it didn't. That feather. It wouldn't leave my head. It felt like a ghost. No, it felt like proof. Proof that something else happened out there.
But I didn't know what.
I didn't know how to explain it to myself, let alone someone else. I replayed it 100 times. I should have died. But I didn't. And there was no one around to save me. Unless you counted that feather. Which sounds insane. I know that. I'm not stupid. I didn't suddenly become some crystal-burning hippie just because I saw something weird in a dream. I was still me, still broke, still pissed off, still trying to figure out if life was a joke or a punishment. But that dream. The way the hand had grabbed mine. The way I felt safe even though I was dying. That wasn't just trauma talking. That was something else. I didn't tell anyone. Mostly because I didn't have anyone to tell. I thought about calling my mom. But what would I even say? "Hey, Ma. I tried to kill myself, but a feather stopped me. Also, I saw a glowing hand in a dream, and now I'm scared of sleeping." She'd probably say I needed a priest. Or a husband. Or both. I texted my ex instead. Just one word.
Hey. He didn't reply.
Honestly, I wasn't even mad. Just embarrassed. I still wanted someone to pick up my pieces when I didn't even know where half of them were. The days blurred. I walked around like a ghost in my own skin. Watched shows I didn't care about. Applied to jobs I didn't want.
Drank.
Smoked. Slept too much and too little somehow at the same time. One night, I pulled up Google and typed, "What does a peacock feather mean?" Enter.
Scroll.
Peacock feathers are associated with divine protection in Hinduism, especially with the god Krishna. I blinked.
Krishna.
I'd heard the name before, maybe in a yoga video or something spiritual my coworker used to mumble about. I never paid attention. I clicked again. Lord Krishna is often depicted with a peacock feather in his crown, symbol of beauty, grace, and cosmic truth. Another page. Another link. The feather represents the divine watching over you. My chest tightened. I shut the laptop. The next week, I got a job at a retail store. Some chain place. You know the kind. Bright lights, smiling managers, minimum wage behind fake corporate joy. My job was folding jeans and pretending to care about loyalty programs. But it paid. And it filled the hours. And honestly, that's all I needed. Time to pass. Noise to drown out the quiet. Still, I couldn't shake that feather. It was like it had imprinted itself on me. Like every time I blinked too long, I could see it floating again. Underscore 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 underscore. One Saturday afternoon, I was walking home from a shift, blue apron stuffed in my bag, earbuds in, world off. It was sunny, but not in the happy way. More like the kind of sun that makes you notice how tired everything looks. I turned a corner and stopped. There was a group of people in white robes,
Singing.
clapping, smiling like they knew a secret the rest of us didn't. The sound wasn't just music, it was rhythmic, alive. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. I stood frozen. The hairs on my neck stood up. My breath caught, because in the center of the group, on a small wooden float being pulled down the street, was a statue of a man with a flute, blue-skinned,
Crowned.
and in his crown, clear as day, was a peacock feather. Underscore 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 underscore. It hit me like a punch. That feather, that face, that presence. It was him. It was the hand in my dream. I don't remember walking home. I think I floated. I was sweating but shivering. My heart wouldn't slow down. My legs didn't feel real. I went straight to my room, shut the door, and sat on the floor. Pulled out my phone. Searched again. Krishna. I fell into a rabbit hole. The Gita. Arjuna. The battlefield.
Karma. Detachment. Dharma.
The soul is eternal. I read for hours. I don't know why, but I needed to know. Like some part of me had been hungry for this, and now it had found its meal. One quote stopped me cold. I am seated in everyone's heart, and from me come remembrance, knowledge, and forgetfulness. Bhagavad Gita 15.15. I whispered it out loud. I don't know how I knew, but I was sure. He was the one who pulled me back. I stayed up until 3 a.m. reading verses. They weren't just words. They felt alive. Like someone finally saw what was inside me, my rage, my fear, my heartbreak, and instead of judging it, just said, "Come home. You're not broken. You're just lost." I cried that night. But for the first time, it wasn't because I wanted to die. It was because, maybe, just maybe, I wasn't alone. They say when you find something that changes your life, you feel peace. But that wasn't true for me. I didn't feel peace. I felt war. A quiet one. A tug-of-war between the part of me that wanted to heal and the part that wanted to disappear. Between the girl who folded jeans for strangers and the one who saw a blue-skinned man in a dream with a feather in his crown. Between the version of me that still thought God was a cruel joke and the one who, for the first time, wasn't so sure. I started reading the Bhagavad Gita every night after work. At first, it felt like reading Shakespeare with a migraine. Ancient words, strange names, a battlefield I didn't understand. But there was something in it. Something underneath the pages. A heartbeat. I'd lie on the mattress on my floor, still in my retail uniform, and whisper the verses out loud. Not because I believed in them, but because they made my chest feel like it was cracking open in a way I couldn't explain. One line kept coming back to me like a song I didn't know I remembered. The soul is neither born, nor does it ever die. I wasn't even sure I had a soul. But something about that sentence made me feel like maybe I did. During the day, I pretended nothing had changed. I still showed up at work. Still let customers walk all over me. Still avoided calls from my mother, still avoided mirrors. But inside, I was different. I started questioning everything. Why was I so angry all the time? Why did I cling to pain like it was my personality? Why did I believe I was worthless just because a few broken people told me so? The Gita didn't give me answers. It gave me better questions. It asked me who I really was underneath all the stories I told myself. It asked if I was my pain or if I was the witness to it. Some nights I drank anyway. Habit, comfort, numbness. But the bottle started tasting like guilt. Like I was betraying something inside me, something that had pulled me out of traffic, something that was asking me to remember who I really was. I'd sit there, staring at the amber liquid in the glass, whispering verses under my breath like some half-baked monk in a hoodie. I wasn't holy. I wasn't spiritual. I was still hurting. But I was listening now. One night I broke. Not in the dramatic, sobbing on the floor kind of way. It was quiet.
Still.
I just stared at the Gita and said, out loud, if you're real, I need you to help me. Because I don't know how to be alive anymore. I don't know how to keep pretending this doesn't hurt. I'm tired. I'm angry. I'm lost. And I don't know what I'm doing. The words didn't echo. The room didn't shake. No divine light. No thunder. Just silence. But for the first time, it wasn't empty. Things didn't change overnight. The next morning, I still woke up tired. Still had bills. Still worked for minimum wage in a store full of fluorescent lights and people who didn't see me.
But I smiled at a customer that day.
Not a fake one. A real one. I folded shirts lower. Neater. Like maybe, just maybe, doing something with care meant I mattered. I stopped drinking during the week. Switched to water. Started reading about karma and detachment. Concepts that made my brain hurt but also made my soul sigh like it had been waiting to hear this stuff forever. I wasn't healed, but I'd stopped bleeding. One evening, I was walking home from work. The same route. Same street. But everything looked different. I saw trees instead of trash. Heard birds instead of traffic. Felt the breeze like it was saying my name. I passed a temple. A little one. Sandwiched between a laundromat and a Mexican restaurant. And outside, taped to the glass door, was a poster. Bhagavad Gita study, Sundays 6 p.m. Open to all. My feet froze. My heart screamed no. But something quieter inside me whispered go. I tore off one of the tabs with the number. Stuffed it in my pocket. I didn't call.
Not yet.
But I carried that piece of paper with me for 3 days. Like it was a lifeline. Like it was the next step. Like maybe the road I was on wasn't ending, it was beginning. They don't tell you this, but healing isn't light pouring into the dark. It's fire. A slow burn that scorches everything you thought you were until all that's left is truth. I thought reading the Gita would fix me. I thought smiling at customers and drinking less and folding jeans neater would mean I was on some higher path. But growth doesn't come in straight lines. It comes in cycles. And the next one hit me like a goddamn freight train. It started with a phone call. I was in the break room of the store, scrolling through quotes on my phone during a 10-minute break I hadn't even wanted. I had the Gita app open. One verse hit me right in the chest. You have the right to work, but not to the fruits of your actions. I was trying to decode that when my phone buzzed. Mom. I stared at the screen like it was a snake. I hadn't spoken to her in months. Not since Thanksgiving. Not since she told me therapy was for cowards and losers. Against better judgment, I answered. Hope, she said, breathless. There was panic in her voice. The kind that makes your spine go rigid even before you hear what comes next. It's your daddy. Heart attack. He's in the hospital. They don't know if he's gonna. Her voice cracked.
I didn't hear the rest.
You don't expect to feel anything when it comes to a man who never hugged you without it feeling like a job. But I did. Not love. Not exactly. More like guilt.
Rage.
Sadness, with no clear direction. I booked the cheapest bus ticket to my hometown for the next morning. Packed a small bag. Left a sticky note for my manager. Family emergency. Back Monday. Hope. I didn't sleep that night. Just stared at the ceiling. Didn't drink either. I wanted to, but I opened the Gita instead. Even a little effort on this path can protect one from great fear. The house smelled the same. Old grease. Cigarettes. Broken dreams. Mama looked older. Worn out, like grief had chewed her up before it even had a reason to finish the job. She hugged me for the first time in years. Held on like she thought I'd vanish. He's stable, she whispered. I nodded. Didn't speak. Just dropped my bag on the floor and sat on the same couch I used to cry into as a teenager. Everything was the same. But I wasn't. That night, I walked into my old bedroom. It was like a museum of someone I didn't recognize. Cheerleader trophies I'd never won. Photos of friends I didn't speak to anymore. A Bible my mom put on the nightstand, even though she knew I never read it. I sat on the bed, pulled the Gita from my backpack, and stared at it. I don't belong here anymore, I whispered. The words came out bitter.
Guilty.
Mama knocked on the door. I slid the Gita under the blanket without thinking.
She walked in.
Looked at the bed. Then at me. Her eyes landed on the edge of the book, peeking out from the sheet. "What's that?" she asked, voice flat. I hesitated. "It's something I've been reading." Her brow furrowed. "It don't look like a Bible." "It's not." A pause. Then, sharper. "What is it then?" "It's the Bhagavad Gita. From India. It's helped me." She stepped back like I'd slapped her. "You turning into one of them weirdos who chant on street corners now? You think your daddy's in the hospital 'cause God wanted to punish you for this crap?" My heart dropped. Anger surged. "No," I said calmly. "I think he's in the hospital 'cause he never stopped drinking and yelling and bottling everything up like a grenade." Silence. She turned, slammed the door behind her.
I stared at it for a long time.
Then I whispered, to no one, "I don't belong in this house anymore. But maybe that's okay." The next morning, I visited Dad. He was awake.
Weak. Quiet.
I sat by his bedside.
He didn't look at me.
His voice cracked when he finally spoke. "Didn't think you'd come." "I almost didn't," I said honestly. He nodded. "Guess I wasn't much of a father." We sat in silence for a long time. Then he said something that cracked me. "You were always smarter than me." I just didn't know how to say I was proud. I didn't cry, but something in me softened. I reached into my bag and took out the Gita.
He looked at it.
Then at me. "You still believe in all that?" he asked. I don't know if believe is the word, but it's the only thing that's helped me want to live.
He didn't argue.
Just nodded. I left the next day. When the bus rolled into Dallas, I felt different. Lighter. Like I had closed a chapter, not with a clean ending, but with peace. I walked home and pulled out the little flyer from the temple. I stared at the number. Then I dialed. A woman answered.
Calm. Kind.
"Hi," I said. "My name's Hope.
I
think I want to learn." She didn't ask what I meant. She just said, "You're right on time." I stood outside the temple door for 5 whole minutes. Not moving. Not knocking. Just breathing shallow and staring at the faded poster taped to the glass. Bhagavad Gita study. Sundays 6 p.m. Open to all. The words felt heavier than they looked. Open to all.
That meant me, right? Didn't feel like it.
I wasn't raised with faith. I wasn't good. I wasn't clean. I had scars that hadn't scabbed and thoughts I'd never admit out loud. I wasn't some girl in white robes with prayer beads. I was just Hope. 20, worn out, borderline broke, still smelling like retail sweat and last night's unresolved trauma. But I took one step forward, then another, then pushed open the door. The first thing I noticed was the smell. Not incense exactly, but something like it. Sandalwood. Warm, soft, like the air itself was exhaling peace. The walls were simple.
Clean.
Pictures of Krishna hung on them, blue skin, flute in hand, that peacock feather glowing like it knew everything I didn't. A few people sat in a circle on the floor, shoes off, books open in their laps. Nobody turned around and gasped. Nobody stared. They just made space. That felt like a miracle in itself. A woman with kind eyes and silvering hair smiled and motioned for me to sit. "Your Hope?" she asked, like she already knew. "Yeah," I mumbled. "Is it okay if I stay?" "You already are," she said. She handed me a Gita from the center of the room, its pages worn soft like it had been read 1,000 times by people just like me, people looking for something they couldn't name yet. The session began with chanting. I didn't chant, just listened. The syllables were strange, but beautiful. Not in a flashy way, more like the kind of beauty that hums under your skin before your mind even catches it.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare.
It didn't feel like worship. It felt like remembering. Like something in me knew the rhythm, even though my brain didn't. I closed my eyes. Just for a second. And for that 1 second, I wasn't in Dallas. I wasn't 20. I wasn't a retail worker, a daughter, a failure. I was just breath. After the chanting, the reading began. Each person took turns with a verse, then shared what they thought it meant. Some interpretations were poetic. Others sounded like therapy. But none of them felt wrong. And then they got to me. I froze. The woman beside me handed me the book gently, finger pointing at the verse. For the soul, there is neither birth nor death at any time. I read it out loud. My voice shook. Everyone waited. What does it mean to you? Someone asked. I stared down at the page, then up at them. I swallowed. I think it means, maybe I'm not as broken as I thought. Just lost. A few people nodded. One smiled. No one judged. It was the safest I'd felt in years. After the study, I stayed behind. Helped fold blankets. Asked awkward questions. Do I have to be Indian to understand this stuff? No. Do I have to believe in reincarnation? Just start where you are. Is Krishna a god or a person or a symbol or? Yes, the silver-haired woman said. He can be all that. But more than anything, he's your friend. That's how he finds us. As a friend first. That word hit me. Friend. I didn't remember the last time I used it honestly. I walked home in silence that night. No music. No scrolling. Just the sound of my footsteps and the city exhaling around me. Something had shifted. I couldn't name it, but it was real. Like I'd taken the first real breath in years. I still had a busted past. Still had a complicated mom. Still had student debt, a crap job, and a lot of anger. But something inside me had cracked open. And instead of falling apart, I felt like maybe I was falling into something. Back in my apartment, I lit a cheap candle and opened the Gita again. Read the same verse 3 times. Let it sink. You are not this body, but the eternal soul within. For once, I didn't fight the words. I didn't roll my eyes. I didn't scoff or doubt or argue. I just let them sit. Before sleeping, I whispered into the dark. If you're still here, thanks for not letting me die. I didn't know if anyone was listening, but I think he was. Because for the first time in forever, I didn't want to die. I wanted to live, even if I didn't know how yet. It had been 3 weeks since I first walked into the temple. 3 weeks since I'd sat cross-legged on a cold floor, surrounded by strangers who smiled like they knew a secret, and heard the name Krishna spoken like it was both lightning and lullaby. 3 weeks since I'd chanted softly under my breath, unsure of every syllable, and felt something stir behind my ribs, something I hadn't known was still alive. Something was changing. I still worked retail. Still clocked in. Still folded jeans. Still fake smiles for customers who didn't say thank you. But now, I whispered mantras in the stockroom when no one was looking. I didn't tell anyone. Not my coworkers. Not my mom. Not even the girl at the register who sometimes asked about my weekend. This was mine. Private. Protected. Like a new flame in a storm, you cup it with both hands and pray the wind doesn't notice. I kept having dreams. Always the same. Always that moment on the road. Me, mid-step. The SUV. The hand pulling me back. And then, instead of waking up, the dream would stretch. I'd see a man tall, dark, glowing, not glowing like a light bulb, but like truth. He never said a word. He just looked at me. Calm. Infinite. Like he saw everything I'd ever been and loved me anyway. And above him, always was the feather. Floating. Watching. One morning I woke up crying. Not from fear. From longing. Like I missed someone I hadn't met yet. I sat up, wiped my face, and grabbed the Gita from the floor beside my bed. Open to a random page. To those who are constantly devoted to me, I give the understanding by which they can come to me. BG 10.10. I whispered it out loud, then closed my eyes, and said, softly, if you're real, I want to know you. That weekend, I wandered the city. I wasn't looking for anything, but something pulled me toward a park near downtown. A small one, nestled between high-rises and old trees. I heard the music before I saw them. Drums, bells, a chorus of voices, familiar and foreign.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna.
I turned the corner, and there they were. A group of devotees, men and women in saffron and white robes, dancing, smiling, handing out food. The same chants from temple, now out in the open air. A little girl twirled barefoot. A man played a harmonium like it was an extension of his breath. People stared. Some mocked, some filmed. But the devotees, they just kept dancing. I stood frozen at the edge of the crowd. It was like watching joy take physical form. And then someone tapped my arm. He was older, maybe mid-40s, with a beard and soft eyes. Wearing simple robes and a wooden bead necklace. "You've been watching a while," he said. I startled. "Sorry. I didn't mean to intrude." "You didn't," he smiled. "You were called." I blinked. "What?" He pointed to the sky. Sometimes he nudges. Sometimes he yells. "You look like someone who got nudged." I didn't know what to say. He held out a book. The Bhagavad Gita. Slightly different translation than mine. "It's free," he said. "But not cheap. Costs your ego." I laughed, surprised. He laughed too. "You already read it, don't you?" I nodded slowly. "Every night." He looked me over gently. "Then keep going. And start chanting." I hesitated. "I'm not religious. I'm barely surviving." "All the more reason," he said. "Chant anyway." I took the book. He told me about japa beads, daily mantras, morning practice. I didn't remember it all, but I remembered how he said goodbye. Krishna doesn't wait for saints. He walks with the wounded. That line lodged in my chest like a match waiting to be struck. That night, I sat cross-legged on my bed, lit a small tea light, and whispered the mantra out loud.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare.
I didn't know the tune, didn't know the rules. I just sang. And for a moment, my breath didn't feel like a burden. It felt like prayer. I started waking up early. Not because I suddenly became one of those 5 a.m. club girls with a vision board and a protein shake.
Nah.
I woke up early because something inside me asked to.
No alarm.
Just my eyes opening to stillness before the city turned loud. And in that stillness, I'd sit on the floor, legs folded, back hunched, hair messy, and whisper, "Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna," over and over.
Soft.
Like a secret. Some days I used my fingers. Some days I just closed my eyes and counted with my breath. Some days I cried while chanting. But I always did it. I was still me. Still messed up. Still forgetting to pay rent on time. Still catching myself staring at the vodka aisle in the grocery store too long. Still getting pissed off when customers treated me like I was invisible. But the Gita had started whispering back. Whenever I wanted to scream or spiral or disappear, one line would surface like a lifeboat. I am not this body. I am the soul within. The first time I really believed it was in the mirror. I was getting ready for work, brushing my teeth, when I caught myself staring. Not at my outfit. Not at my face. At me. There was a moment, a single breath, where I saw the pain in my eyes like it wasn't mine. Like I was standing behind it, watching it, not drowning in it. And I whispered out loud, "This isn't me. This is the costume." It felt insane, but it felt true. At work, I started watching people differently. Every angry customer, soul in a storm. Every rude coworker, a soul forgetting who they are. Even my boss, Mr. Passive-Aggressive Thai guy, he had a soul too, somewhere underneath that corporate jargon and forced authority. I wasn't perfect about it. Some days I snapped, rolled my eyes, muttered curse words under my breath. But something had shifted. I was trying. I kept going to the temple every Sunday. They started remembering my name. Saved me a seat. One lady brought me prasadam, sweet rice and fried plantains, still warm in a little foil container. I asked more questions now. Like, What's the point of karma if we suffer for things we don't remember doing?
Or,
How can I love God if I've hated myself for years? Sometimes the answers came from scriptures. Sometimes from someone's story. Sometimes they didn't come at all. And weirdly, that was okay. One night, I stayed late after the group. Just me and a monk I hadn't talked to before. Young, maybe 30.
calm like a mountain.
Laugh lines like he actually used them. I asked him, why do I feel worse now that I'm getting better? He didn't flinch. Just smiled, like he'd heard that question 100 times. Because when the light turns on, he said, you finally see the mess in the room. That line knocked the breath out of me. I stayed quiet, then asked, is it always this hard? He shrugged, kind. Sometimes harder, but also more beautiful. Then he handed me a string of wooden beads. These are japamala, he said. Use them. Give the mind something to hold that isn't pain. I started using the beads the next morning. 1 round. 16 mantras. Slow, awkward, half-sung, but real. It felt like building a muscle I didn't know I had. Not of faith, but of remembrance. Around that time, my manager cut my hours. Budget stuff, he mumbled. You understand. I didn't. But I nodded. That week I barely made rent. Ate noodles 3 nights in a row. Almost pawned my headphones. Almost went back to that bottle in the back of my cabinet. Instead, I chanted, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. And somewhere around the 12th bead, I whispered, you said I wasn't this body, but this body's hungry. So what do I do now? No booming answer came. But the next day, someone from the temple texted me out of nowhere. Hey, we're doing prasadam distribution near your block. You hungry? Yeah, I was. That week I helped them cook. Chopped vegetables in silence. Stirred massive pots of khichdi. Laughed when someone spilled cumin all over the floor. Then I watched people, homeless, tired, forgotten, line up and eat. One man looked at me and said, you smile like you still remember how to hurt. I didn't know if it was a compliment or a curse, but I smiled anyway, because I think he was right. Back in my apartment that night, I didn't feel holy. I felt sore, tired, a little hopeful, a little scared. I sat with my Gita and asked out loud, are you just a book? Or are you real? And for the first time, I didn't care what the answer was, because either way, I wasn't alone anymore. Something strange was happening. I wasn't angry all the time. That was the first death I didn't notice. Not the loud, fire-in-your-throat rage that used to snap at strangers, but the quieter anger, the one I wore like a jacket, zipped up so tight it felt like skin. It started peeling off.
I didn't mean for it to.
But one morning, I dropped my coffee on the bus.
Normali de kush.
Slam something. Blame the seat. Blame myself. Instead, I just stared at the mess and laughed. Well, damn. Okay then. And that was it.
No tantrum. No spiral.
Just a moment. My coworker, Zoe, the only one under 40 who didn't treat me like a background extra, noticed first. You're different lately, she said during a smoke break. Like, less ghost why? I shrugged. Maybe I am. She looked at me sideways. You dating someone? That made me laugh out loud. Nope. Therapy. Kind of. God. I paused. Something like that, I said. She didn't ask more. Just nodded, flicked her ash, and muttered, keep it up, Texas. But not everything died quietly. Some parts of me fought back. Like the voice that whispered, you're not worth it every time I felt too happy. Or the one that screamed, you're faking it every time I smiled without force. The past didn't want to be left behind. Especially not when my mother called again. It was a Sunday afternoon. I had just gotten home from the temple, prasadam in hand, beads in my backpack, peace blooming like something sacred behind my ribs. Then my phone rang. Mom. I should have ignored it, but I didn't. Her voice came through sharp, brittle like always. I heard you've been going to some cult, she said. I didn't ask who told her. Small towns have loud mouths. It's not a cult, I said calmly. You think some blue god with a flute is gonna fix you? You need a job, Hope. A real job. A real life. I closed my eyes. Mama, I said slowly. I'm doing okay. No, you're surviving.
Barely.
That ain't the same. I wanted to scream.
Cry.
Argue. Instead, I stayed silent. Just breathed. She filled the silence with guilt and scripture and all the things that used to make me feel small. But now her voice sounded distant, like a radio station half out of range. Eventually, she ran out of steam. You still there? Yeah, I said. I just don't feel like fighting.
She paused.
That threw her off. I love you, I added, voice soft but firm. But I don't need to be saved anymore.
I'm not broken, Mama.
Just healing. Another pause. Then, quietly, don't forget where you come from.
I won't, I said.
I just don't want to stay there. After we hung up, I didn't collapse. Didn't reach for a bottle. Didn't rage write in a journal. I just sat down, closed my eyes, and chanted. That night, I wrote something in my notebook, something I hadn't dared put into words before. Maybe I'm not trying to escape anymore. Maybe I'm trying to return. Not to my past, but to something older than all this pain. To who I was before the world told me what to be. A few days later, the monk with laugh lines gave a talk at the temple.
He said,
Real spiritual growth is quiet, like watching snow melt. You only notice it when everything's softer. That hit hard, because that's what I felt.
Softer.
Not weaker, just less jagged. More willing to listen. Less desperate to scream. One morning during my japa, I whispered, I forgive you. I didn't know who I was talking to.
My mom.
My ex. My old self.
God.
Maybe all of them. And maybe that's when the real dying began. Not death like ending. Death like clearing space. Like burning old furniture to build a fire that warms you. I didn't know where this path was leading. Still don't. But I know what it's leading away from. And that's enough for now. I used to think temples were buildings. Places with bells and statues and incense smoke that clung to your clothes. Now, I think I was wrong. Because somewhere between chanting on the bus and whispering Gita verses in the break room, I realized the temple wasn't a place I went to once a week. It was something I was building inside me. It started with small things. Like the way I paused before eating, even just a sandwich, placing my hand on my chest and thanking the universe. Thanking Krishna. Not out loud, just within. Or the way I started smiling at strangers, not out of politeness, but from a place I couldn't name. Or how I began noticing the way the sunlight poured through the window in my apartment, like it had intention. The sacred wasn't just in rituals anymore. It was in everything. One day at the temple, I stayed back after class to clean the floor. While I swept, I asked one of the older women, Radha Ani, they called her, if Krishna was always watching. She looked at me over her shoulder and said, He's not watching, dear. He's waiting. Waiting for what? I asked. For you to recognize him in yourself. But I'm not him.
No, she smiled.
But you're not him either. That line rattled around my head for days. I started looking at people differently again, but now not just as souls, but as reflections. A customer came in, screamed about a return policy. I stayed calm, even smiled. Not because I'm holy, but because halfway through her rant I realized. This woman has no idea who she is. I didn't either once. I think that's the day compassion grew roots in me. Not the pity kind. The kind that makes you see someone beyond their chaos. Beyond yours. At the temple the next Sunday, we studied a new word.
Dharma.
They said it was our nature. Our purpose. Our sacred duty. One of the devotees explained it like this. The dharma of fire is to burn. The dharma of water is to flow. And the dharma of the soul is to serve and love Krishna. That hit me deep. I walked home asking myself, what's my dharma? Was I meant to fold jeans forever? To sell people things they didn't need just so I could keep the lights on? I didn't think so. That week, something cracked. A woman came into the store, said she was from corporate. Started asking about numbers, productivity, my energy. I knew where this was going. 3 days later, they cut my hours again. This time, for good. Restructuring, they said. Not personal. But it felt personal. I walked out with a box of my things and a silence, so loud, I thought my bones would break. I sat on the curb and cried. Not because I was jobless, but because a part of me thought I'd failed again. Then I remembered something from the Gita. Better to fail in one's own dharma than to succeed in another's. I wiped my eyes,
Stared at the sky. Whispered. Fine. You win.
I'm listening now. I started going to the temple every day. Not always for classes.
Sometimes just to sit.
Sometimes just to sweep. Sometimes just to be. And somewhere in that silence, I started hearing ideas. Tiny ones. Wild ones. Like, what if I made a devotional blog? What if I helped the temple run social media? What if I taught others what I'm learning? I hadn't written in years. Not since school. But now, every morning after chanting, I wrote something. Little reflections. Prayers. Lines like, I am not this pain. I am not this past. I am the witness, learning how to return. I didn't know who I was writing to, but I knew it wasn't just for me. Radha Auntie saw my journal one evening. She skimmed a page and said, "This is Seva." I blinked. "It's what?" "Service," she explained. "When we use what Krishna gave us to remind others who they are." I hadn't thought of it like that. But maybe that's what Dharma really was. Not a career, not a paycheck, but a calling. That night, I looked around my room, bare mattress, dim light, second-hand desk, and whispered, "Okay, Krishna, if you gave me a voice, I'll use it." I opened my laptop, made a free blog, posted one line. The temple isn't just a place. It's a person. And I'm trying to build mine from the inside out. And for the first time since all this began, I didn't feel small. I felt useful. The email came on a Tuesday. Subject line, Pilgrimage to India, January 3rd departure. I almost deleted it.
Thought it was spam.
But then I saw the sender, radhaanti@gitacircle.org. She had mentioned it in passing the week before. Every year, a few of us go to Vrindavan.
Puri. Rathra.
If it's meant for you, you'll know. I hadn't taken her seriously. Now I was staring at a flyer with pictures of golden temples, monks barefoot in the dust, women in saris with palms pressed together under banyan trees. Pilgrimage. That word made my chest ache and my stomach tighten. I clicked the link. $1,100. 2 weeks. Airfare not included. I closed my laptop, then opened it again, then sat on the edge of my bed, heart pounding, whispering to myself, "This is insane." I didn't have $1,100. I had maybe $212 in my account and some loose change in a chipped coffee mug labeled Rent and Regret Fund. I was between jobs, between identities, between knowing who I used to be and having any clue who I was becoming. But that night, during japa, a thought crept in. You already died once. What's the worst that could happen now? I didn't tell anyone at first. Not the devotees. Not my mom.
Not Zoe.
I just started saving. I stopped buying coffee. Took up odd jobs, walking dogs, editing resumes, folding laundry for neighbors. I sold my TV. Canceled everything except Wi-Fi and water. Every dollar I stashed in a jar under my bed labeled Leap. One morning at the temple, I stayed back to help with garlands. As I strung marigolds onto thread, Radhaani sat beside me and asked, casually, "You thinking about India?" I froze. "How did you?" She smiled. "Your aura changed." "My aura?" She nodded. "When the soul starts packing her bags, the body knows." I laughed. "I don't even have a passport." She reached into her bag, pulled out a packet. "Start here," she said. "Then let Krishna handle the rest." It wasn't easy. Halfway through December, I still didn't have enough. Every time I'd get close, something would hit. An overdue bill, an emergency, another delay. And I started doubting. Not just the plan, but everything. Was I delusional? Running away again? Falling into spiritual escapism? But then one night I opened the Gita again, chapter 2, verse 47. You have the right to perform your duty, but not to the fruits. I whispered. Okay,
I'll try.
you handle the fruit. 2 days later, I got an email. A woman from the temple, someone I'd never spoken to, had read my blog. She wrote, I was going through depression last year. I stumbled on your page by accident. Your words brought me back to chanting. I saw you're trying to go to India. I'd like to help. Attached was a PayPal screenshot. $300. I cried for 20 minutes. Not because of the money, but because for the first time I knew I was being guided. On New Year's Eve, I packed a borrowed backpack. Inside it, one worn copy of the Gita,
Japa beads.
3 quartas from the temple thrift box, and the peacock feather I found after my suicide attempt. I held it in my palm before I zipped the bag. Whispered, Okay, Krishna, let's go. My flight left January 2nd. First international trip. First passport stamp. First time I wasn't running from something, but towards something. At the airport, I thought about that girl who stood in traffic waiting for death. And I whispered to her in my head, You were never trying to die. You were trying to be reborn. The last thing I saw from the window before we took off was the Dallas skyline.
Familiar. Tired. Mean it.
The next time I saw land, it was India. Louder. Wilder.
Sacred.
And waiting. If Vrindavan was a whisper, Puri was a roar. Where Vrindavan wrapped you in song and dust, Puri cracked you open with salt and sun. The moment I stepped off the train, I could smell the ocean before I could see it. I'd never seen the Bay of Bengal before. But somehow, it felt like it had been waiting for me. The temple of Jagannath loomed like something out of a dream. Massive, ancient, alive. It didn't feel like it was built. It felt like it had grown straight from the earth, rooted in prayer, blood, and centuries of tears. They say Jagannath is Krishna in his most merciful form. They say he sees everything. And when I looked up at his chariot tower, I felt it. Not judgment. Just knowing. We weren't allowed inside the inner sanctum. Foreigners aren't permitted past the gate. At first, I was furious. It felt unfair, like Krishna was being kept from me. But then one of the locals pointed at my chest and said, You want to see Jagannath? See him here. And tapped his own heart. That night, I sat alone on the beach. The waves sounded like chanting. The wind carried the smell of roasted peanuts and wet driftwood. I watched crabs dart sideways across the sand like little secrets. Then I cried. Not because I was sad, but because I finally wasn't. A little boy came up to me. Big eyes. Barefoot. Hair sticking straight up like a question mark. He handed me a seashell. Didn't say a word. Just smiled. Then ran off. Inside the shell was a note, scribbled in Hindi and broken English. No mistake is forever. Krishna knows your heart. My breath caught. I looked around, but the boy had disappeared into the dark like a phantom. I held that shell to my chest like it was a relic, and whispered, Thank you. The next day, we watched the bhoga offering at the temple. Dozens of dishes, cooked with no onion, no garlic, no ego, offered to Jagannath with full devotion. The priests didn't perform. They surrendered. A woman beside me whispered, Everything we eat should be a prayer. Not just food. Every breath. I thought about all the nights I'd eaten while crying. Nights I'd eaten while hating myself. Nights I hadn't eaten at all. What would it mean to eat with love? To live with love? Later, during satsang, a monk gave a lecture on karma. He said, Karma is not punishment. It is education. It is love in disguise. That sentence shattered something in me. I used to think God was punishing me. For being broken. For messing up.
For surviving when I didn't want to. But now
I began to wonder. What if he was just teaching me? What if every heartbreak was a comma, not a period? What if karma was the classroom I'd spent years sleeping through? I asked the monk afterward, How do you know when karma is burned? He smiled, toothy and tired. When it doesn't control your reaction anymore. That night, I didn't chant out of fear. I chanted out of joy. On the sand. Under the stars. with the waves keeping rhythm. My voice cracked. My hands trembled. My beads were sticky from sweat. But I kept going. Hare Krishna, 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 Hare, over and over, until the sound felt less like a sound and more like a homecoming. I thought of the girl who once stepped into traffic. And I said, not as a prayer, but as a truth. She's not here anymore. The tide crept in, touched my toes. And I swear, just for a moment, the ocean sang with me. Dvarka felt like the opposite of Vrindavan. If Vrindavan was soft laughter and mischief, Dvarka was steel will and royal silence. The air was different. Salter. Heavier. Still. The city didn't flirt with you the way Vrindavan did. It stood tall, gold, detached. Like Krishna when he was king. I stepped off the train and felt it immediately. A kind of regal stillness. Not cold. Not unkind. Just sovereign. In Vrindavan, Krishna was the beloved boy. Here he was the strategist, the diplomat, the protector, the version of him I wasn't sure I could love yet. Our group stayed in a small guest house near the Dwarkadish temple. The guide told us, this is where Krishna ruled after leaving Vrindavan. This is the city he built, only to leave it behind when the time came. I nodded, but inside I wondered, why would God build something just to abandon it? Why would he love and then leave? The temple itself was immense. The carvings so intricate they looked like lace and stone. The deity inside towered above us. Krishna in kingly form. Crown heavy. Eyes sharp. No flute. No peacock feather. He didn't look at me with mischief. He looked at me like he expected something. Like I had work to do. I stayed back that evening after the group left. Sat in the back corner of the temple. Watched people come and go. Businessmen. Mothers. Pilgrims with cracked feet and tired shoulders. And I realized, no one begged here. Not like in Vrindavan. In Dvarka, they offered garlands,
Wealth. Tears. Vows.
I felt small. I had nothing to offer. Just a broken past and a handful of beads. I walked down to the edge of the sea. The waves weren't wild like in Puri. They were deliberate. They came in like decisions. I sat there, whispering the mantra, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. And I asked, is this what you want from me? To stand tall? To rule something? What could I possibly rule? No answer came. Only silence. But in that silence, something surfaced. Act without attachment to the results. Bhagavad Gita, Chapter 2, Verse 47. I'd read it a dozen times. But here it hit different. This wasn't about ruling the world. It was about ruling myself. My emotions. My reactions. My illusions. Maybe that's why Krishna had to become a king. Not to wield power, but to transcend it. The next morning, I found a local woman sweeping the temple steps. I offered to help. We didn't speak the same language, but we smiled the same smile. For an hour, we cleaned in silence. And it felt like worship. Because it was. Later that day, I overheard a guide telling a tourist. Krishna never returned to Vrindavan. But he never forgot it. That is the secret of detachment. You love without needing to possess. That line struck me like thunder. I thought about all the people I tried to hold on to. All the places I never forgave myself for leaving. Maybe real love wasn't clinging. Maybe it was letting go. Without closing your heart. That night, I opened my Gita again. Not to seek answers, but to sit with the questions. I underlined this verse. Be steadfast in yoga, O Arjuna. Perform your duty and abandon all attachment to success or failure. BG 2.48. I whispered, okay, I'll try. Then I did something terrifying. I opened a blank notebook and wrote down my purpose. Or at least what I thought it might be. I want to help people the way I was helped. I want to build something that makes them feel less alone. I don't want a big life. I want a meaningful one. And at the bottom, I added, let me be used, Krishna. Not for glory, just for grace. The next morning, I caught the last sunrise before we left. The sea was flat, golden, serious, just like Dvarka. And when I bowed one last time at the temple gates, I didn't ask for blessings. I whispered, "Give me the strength to do what you need from me, even if it's hard." Mathura wasn't what I expected. It wasn't polished like Dvarka. It wasn't playful like Vrindavan. It wasn't thunderous like Puri. It was bruised, ancient, loud, crumbling. More like a scar than a city. But maybe that's why it made sense. Because scars are proof you were hurt, and that you healed. This was where Krishna was born. Not among flowers and flutes, but in a prison cell.
Chains. Cold.
A tyrant uncle hunting him before his first breath. The divine wasn't delivered into comfort. He was born into fear. And maybe so was I. We visited the prison-turned temple first.
Dark stone. Heavy air.
The silence felt thicker than the walls. I knelt where they said Devki had given birth, closed my eyes, and whispered, "If even God had to suffer to be born, maybe I can stop blaming myself for how I started." That day, I didn't chant. I just walked. Through alleys where rickshaws tangled like wires. Through markets where goats roamed like customers. Through temples with cracked walls and timeless echoes. Everywhere I turned, I saw reminders. Beginnings are messy, but they matter. At one point, I passed a girl about 8 years old, sitting on the curb with her baby brother asleep in her lap. She wasn't begging. She wasn't crying. She was just waiting. Still, barefoot, eyes wide open. And I thought, that was me once. Maybe not in Mathura, but in spirit. A girl holding something fragile, just trying to survive the moment. I sat across from her, quietly, offer her my last pack of biscuits. She shook her head, then pointed at my japa beads around my wrist. Her voice was soft. "You chant." I nodded. She smiled just a little.
Good.
Then turned her gaze back to the road. That one word, good, hit harder than 1,000 compliments. Because she didn't care if I was rich or wise or American. She just cared that I remembered. That night, back at the ashram, we had our final group session. One of the monks said, "The most sacred journey is not Vrindavan or Puri or Dvarka. It's from the mind to the heart."
He paused.
Looked at us. Most people never take it. I knew then that I had. Not all the way, but far enough to never turn back. My last morning in India, I went back to the prison temple. Alone. I pressed my forehead to the stone floor and said, "I don't know where this is going, but I trust you now. Use me." Then I stood up. Not because I was ready, but because I was willing. At the airport, someone asked me where I was flying. "Dallas," I said. But inside, I whispered, "Into the next chapter." When the plane lifted, I looked out the window one last time. The landscape below blurred, temples, rivers, crowds, cows, all shrinking. But my chest? It had never felt so wide. Because I wasn't leaving India. India had moved into me. And I was bringing her back. I landed in Dallas on a Tuesday. Skyline sharp. Air stale. January cold. It felt like the whole city had been paused, waiting for me to press play again. Only, I wasn't the same Hope who'd left. My skin still held the dust of India. My hands still remembered temple bells. My heart still beat to a new rhythm. But America didn't care. The airport smelled like pretzels and disinfectant. People rushed with headphones in, eyes blank, coffee cups clutched like shields. I stood still in the crowd, watching them. No one made eye contact. No one said, "Hare Krishna." No one smiled with their soul. It hit me hard. You're back in the land of noise. My old apartment smelled like dust and stale dreams. I dropped my bag, sat on the floor. No altar. No bells. No devotees singing in the next room. Just me. And silence. The next morning, I woke up at 5 a.m. out of habit. Sat cross-legged on the floor with my beads. Chanted softly.
And cried.
Not because I missed India, but because I was scared of forgetting who I'd become there. I opened the Gita. Same copy. now wrapped in a cloth I bought in Vrindavan. Random page. Verse 18.66. Abandon all varieties of religion and just surrender unto me. I shall deliver you from all sinful reactions. Do not fear. I whispered, okay, but what now? Jobs were scarce. I filled out forms, got ghosted, tried old contacts. Nothing clicked. At one point, I nearly took a cashier job again. But something inside me screamed, you didn't survive all that just to fold jeans again. I started posting my reflections online again. Short pieces from my journal, Gita quotes, modern-day translations of devotion. I expected nothing, but people started reading, then messaging, then sharing. A woman from New York wrote, I've been in therapy for 3 years, but one line in your post made something click. A man from Florida sent, my daughter tried to end her life last year. Your story helped me understand her pain in a new way. I read every message with trembling hands, and one night I sat back and said out loud, this is the work. This is the Dharma. I didn't want a job. I wanted a mission. So I built a simple website, named it the Inner Temple. Just a blog at first, then a mailing list, then a PDF guide, Bhagavad Gita for the brokenhearted. People downloaded it like water in a drought. One day, I was invited to speak on a small podcast, then a panel, then a college event. I wasn't a preacher. I wasn't a monk. But I was a woman who had walked through hell barefoot and found grace on the other side. And people wanted to hear that. I monetized nothing at first. But the universe has a way of supporting what's aligned. A business coach reached out. Your message has power. Let's build you a platform. We made online courses. Not just spirituality, but mindset, trauma healing, emotional resilience, all tied to Dharma and karma. We launched. It exploded. I used the money to upgrade my apartment. But not much else. Most of it went back into the work. Hiring a team, building a donation arm, starting the Hope Rising Foundation to support women leaving abuse and depression. Every dollar felt like seva. One night, I stood on the rooftop of my building. Dallas glittered below. And I said aloud, I didn't get rich. I got ready. And then Krishna handled the rest. People think it happened overnight. That I posted one viral video and woke up a millionaire. That couldn't be further from the truth. It wasn't overnight. It was every night. Every night I stayed up, writing while the world slept. Every night I cried over a donation that didn't come. Every night I wondered if I was just another broken girl pretending to be healed. But every morning I chanted. And every mantra carved out another inch of space inside me where faith could grow. I never set out to build a business. I set out to tell the truth. That healing is possible. That God doesn't only live in temples, He lives in grief too. That the Gita isn't just for yogis and monks. It's for waitresses and lost daughters and women who once stood in traffic, ready to die. The money came because the mission was real. It started small. A $5 downloadable journal. Then a video course on spiritual self-worth. Then corporate workshops on karma and leadership. HR heads, psychologists, influencers, they all came knocking. Not because I was impressive, but because I was honest. My inbox flooded with collaborations, affiliate requests, investment pitches. I turned down most. I wasn't interested in selling leggings or detox tea. But then came the idea for a physical retreat center, the sanctuary. A space for people to breathe, to remember, to fall apart and begin again. I said yes. We bought land in Texas Hill Country. When the first foundation stone was laid, I held the Gita in one hand and that same peacock feather in the other. I whispered, this is yours, Krishna. I'm just the hands. The press called me the billionaire mystic. I cringed at that. I didn't feel like either. Yes, the numbers were real. 7-figure product launches. Book deals. Speaking tours across continents. But none of that mattered as much as the quiet emails. I haven't self-harmed in 3 months, thanks to your voice. I gave up on God. You helped me find Him again in myself. Those were the riches. I built my team from people like me, single moms, ex-addicts, domestic abuse survivors, veterans with PTSD. We prayed together before strategy meetings. We read the Gita before product planning. We treated customer service as seva. The Hope Rising Foundation launched trauma centers in 5 cities within 2 years. Each one had a little temple inside. Not big or grand. Just a place to sit and chant. A place where pain met peace. One day, I was asked to speak at the World Economic Forum. They flew me to Switzerland. Put me in a 5-star hotel with golden faucets and lavender on the pillow. I stood in front of CEOs, billionaires, presidents. And I said, "Your profit doesn't impress me. Your surrender does." There was a long silence. Then a woman in the back stood up and began to cry. I was offered a reality show. I declined. I was offered a mansion in Beverly Hills. I left. I still lived in Dallas. Still cooked my own khichdi on Sundays. Still chanted my 16 rounds every morning before my inbox saw light. Because I knew, if I dropped the mantra, I'd lose everything. Not the business. Myself. One night, alone on the roof again, I asked, "Why me?" And I heard, not with ears but inside. "Because you didn't want the crown. You wanted the cause." I bowed my head and said, "Let me never forget. Let me always remember the girl who stepped into traffic and was pulled back not to survive but to serve." I hadn't seen my mother in 6 years. Not in person anyway. I'd heard her voice once, after my first podcast went viral. She'd left a voicemail that just said, "I saw you on the YouTube. No, I'm proud of you. No, sorry for everything." Just that. It took me another year before I called her back. She still lived in that same trailer. Same rusted mailbox. Same dying lawn. Same curtains yellowed with time. When I pulled up in my modest black SUV, her first words weren't, "Hi." They were, "You cut your hair." I laughed. Because of course, that's what she'd notice. The conversation was stiff. She offered me instant coffee. I brought real tea. She turned on the TV. I asked her to turn it off. She lit a cigarette. I opened a window. But when I showed her pictures from India, temples, women in saris, the Yamuna River, something in her eyes softened. She didn't understand it, but she could see something had changed in me. And maybe that was enough. I stayed 2 days. On the second night, I left a small Bhagavad Gita on her kitchen counter. Didn't tell her what it was. Just slid a note inside. "This saved my life. It might help yours too. No pressure. Just love." From there, I started going further back. To old friends. Old teachers. Even the diner I used to work at. I didn't walk in with a camera crew or a checkbook. I walked in with presence. With listening. With the ability to sit in someone's pain without needing to fix it. Because I'd learned presence is the most generous thing you can give. We began hosting curtain nights in places no one thought would want them. Trailer parks. Prisons. Shelters. Community halls lit by flickering fluorescent lights.
We didn't ask people to chant.
We just showed up. With drums. With flowers. With stories. And slowly, their walls started to melt. One woman in a recovery center stood up after our program and said, "I've been sober 14 days. This was the first hour I didn't think about drinking." Another, tattoos up her arms, fresh out of jail, asked me, "Is Krishna okay with people like me?" I said, "He specializes in people like you." We opened a small temple in Oak Cliff, a forgotten neighborhood on the edge of Dallas. People said it wouldn't work.
Too poor.
Too broken. Too forgotten. But Krishna doesn't follow real estate logic. He shows up where he's invited. One day, I walked into the temple early. No one else was there. A little girl, maybe 5, sat in front of the altar with folded hands. I asked, "Are you praying?" She said, "No, I'm talking to my friend." And my throat closed. Because I remembered the first time I'd ever seen a deity and felt seen back. That temple became the heart of our community. Not just a place of worship, but of belonging. People came not to escape life, but to understand it, to find meaning in the mess, to turn their wounds into wisdom. My foundation grew, not just in reach, but in depth. We trained women in trauma-sensitive bhakti, gave scholarships to single moms to learn spiritual coaching, launched a prison pen pal program based on Gita studies. This wasn't charity. It was karma being recycled into compassion. One day, someone asked me, "Don't you miss your old life?" Before all of this, I smiled, because I didn't know how to explain. My old life never really ended. It just got transformed, like milk into butter. Same essence, new form, stronger. I kept my peacock feather on my desk. Sometimes when I felt lost, I'd hold it and remember the girl who once stepped into traffic.
Not to die,
But to begin, they gave me a humanitarian award in New York. Gold plaque, red carpet, flashes, speeches with too many adjectives. I stood backstage in a silk sari, the same peacock feather tucked into my bun. They asked me to say a few words. I stepped up to the mic, looked at the crowd of polished faces, industry leaders, philanthropists, millionaires in pearls, and I said, "I'm not here to inspire you. I'm here to remind you. God never left. You did." You could hear a pin drop. I told the story. All of it. The diner, the traffic, the feather, the fall, and the grace. I spoke without notes, without filters, without performance. I said, "Your lowest moment is not the end. It's the invitation." And when I walked off the stage, I didn't feel proud. I felt empty, like I'd poured everything I had and been refilled by something infinite. That night, I didn't go to the after party. I sat alone in my hotel room, window open, beads in hand. I looked out at the glittering city and whispered, "This isn't mine. None of it ever was. I'm just the offering." Months passed. The movement grew. People all over the world started chanting again, not out of tradition but out of survival. We opened a center in Brazil, a rehab in Detroit, a farm in Kenya. But I stopped putting my name on everything, because this wasn't mine. It was his. The team begged me to write a memoir. I resisted, but eventually I did. Title: Hope. The Girl Who Tried to Die and Lived Instead. It became a bestseller, translated into 17 languages. But what mattered more were the letters I got. "I read your book on a hospital bed and decided to live. You helped me forgive my mother. I used your chanting practice to survive prison. I finally stopped blaming God." Each one was a flame. Each one, proof that my story wasn't mine anymore. One day, I got a message from an unknown number. "This is the girl who sat on the curb in Mathura. I just finished college. Still chant every day." I cried, because that, more than any award, meant it was working. The ripple, the remembrance, the return. I stepped back from the spotlight, let others lead, started gardening, teaching kids the Gita with puppets, laughing more. One morning, while pulling weeds in the temple garden, I found a feather tucked in a patch of tulsi. It wasn't there the day before. I looked around. No one else was there. And I smiled. "Still watching me, huh?" That evening, I led one final satsang. Only 12 people. No camera. No stage. Just a circle of hearts. And I said, "Let this life not be a ladder, but a lamp. Let it burn out in the service of love." The next morning, I turned off my phone, stepped outside barefoot. No makeup. No role. No name badge. Just me. A soul. A servant. A girl who once tried to die and was instead asked to live fully. My last entry in my journal was this: "I don't need applause. I need only this. To wake each day and say, 'Use me again, Krishna,' and mean it."
Subscribe now and never miss out.